So the process of muscle contraction begins with the signal from the central nervous system. Motor neurons come through that central nervous system, which are attached to the muscle fibers. That space between the neuron and the muscle cell is called the synapse. And action potential then occurs, which is that electrical impulse sent from the CNS to the muscle fiber. Neurotransmitters, which are the purple triangles, well, what looks to be triangles, and acetylcholine, are then released into the synapse, binding into the muscle fiber. This action potential releases calcium ions into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is labeled SR, then into the sarcoplasm, which is just labeled S. Once in the sarcoplasm, the calcium ions increase, making it rain calcium ions.
So here I'm making an actin filament. I am going to fast forward this part just a little.
As I mentioned, I'm making the actin filament. The yellow dots here are the binding sites for the myosin heads. I then am going to make tropomyosin. It's going to look a little trippy, so trippy tropomyosin it is. Then I am going to create troponin. Following troponin is the calcium ions. With the increase of the calcium ions, they are more likely to combine with that subunit troponin, which are located on the actin filaments. As you see, the calcium ion and troponin combo triggers a change in the tropomyosin, leaving the binding site for the myosin heads, which are in purple. As you see, they look like little purple hearts, exposed. So here in this picture, the binding sites are not exposed, but the myosin heads do need a little assistance with attaching to those binding sites. So their good old pal comes swooping in, super ATP. Woo woo. With the active sites exposed, the myosin heads containing what is now ADP and inorganic phosphate give the myosin heads the energy to form a cross bridge. The cross bridge pulls the actin filaments, allowing them to slide above the myosin filaments, which causes this contraction. Next up is my classmate Coventry.
Hi, I will be talking about the relaxation of the muscle. Now, did you know that when you are relaxing that the nerves stop when they get stimulated? And the actin and myosin returns to their unbound state, causing the muscles to relax. During the resting or moderate exercising, the cardiovascular system supplies the oxygen to support the aerobic respiration. Oxygen debt. How the oxygen affects your muscles. The amount of oxygen that is needed by the liver cells to convert the accumulated lactic acid to the glucose and to restore the muscle ATP in the creative phosphate concentrate. Muscle fatigue. What is muscle fatigue? Muscle fatigue is the ability to contract your muscles. Some things that could cause that is increase of blood flow, the ion imbalance across the scleromelia, and the accumulation of lactic acid. And that's a wrap.
Hello class, I'm the sick voice of Amber Winfield, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about muscle contraction. So, For starters, did you know that in the process of movement, the rules of the muscles perform certain actions? Two of those actions are the agonist, where the muscles causes an action. So, agonist gets the action. And the antagonists are muscles whose contraction causes the movement in the opposite direction of the prime mover. So, anti equals opposite. Next is the types of energy sources that play a role in the muscle contraction. These three sources are ATP reserve, which plays a small amount, creatine phosphate, which is the initial source of energy to regenerate ATP from ADP and P, and lastly, cellular respiration. Remember, when calcium binds to troponin, it causes a change. Well, this in turn moves tropomyosin, which exposes myosin binding sites. The myosin heads contain ATP. Before they can actually bind to the myosin binding site, the ATP must be hydrolyzed into ADP and P. This changes the orientation of the myosin head. Once they bind, it must expel the ADP and P molecule to actually move the head and pull the filament.
In the body, there are various types of muscles, and even more ways those muscles move and contract. Skeletal muscle attaches to the skeleton and produces movement of the body and produces body heat. Skeletal muscle is striated, meaning it has lines on it when you look at a diagram of it, and multinucleated, meaning it has more than one nucleus. It moves in different contractions. So there's isometric contractions, and they occur when muscle tissue contracts but does not produce joint movement. So like if you're just pushing against a wall and tense the muscle up, but you don't move your arm. Isotonic contractions occur when tension in the muscle remains the same while the length of the muscle changes. An example of that would be lifting and lowering weights as one cohesive movement. And eccentric contraction is when a muscle is holding a weight and lengthens under the load. So it's when you're lowering the weight from a heightened position, so you're moving your arm down rather than pulling it up. And concentric contractions occur when muscles shorten contract while acting against a load. An example would be lifting and holding a weight, so pulling the weight up and holding it, while an eccentric contraction, for the opposite, would be lowering a weight and holding it down with your arm more extended. Smooth muscle is found in the internal organs and is an involuntary muscle, unlike skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle, you have to think about it to move it, and there has to be a stimulus, but smooth muscle is involuntary, so it moves without you telling it to. It just knows what to do when it's stimulated on its own. Smooth muscle works to facilitate digestion and other internal organ work. It's found mostly in your internal organs. And cardiac muscle is found in the heart and contains intercalated discs. It's also voluntary and works to pump the heart. The intercalated discs work together to maintain steady rhythm in the heart.